Here to present this year's Lifetime Achievement Award, a broadcasting legend, a journalist for over half a century, the anchor and managing editor of Dan Rather Reports. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Rather.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Friends, colleagues, peers, and leaders of our Academy, good evening. It is a privilege and high honor to bear witness to the extraordinary life and career of William J. Bill Small and to present him with a Lifetime Achievement Award for his many contributions to quality journalism. This one, my friends, is from the heart. No person, none, has ever deserved the award more. A person is what his or her record is. And this man's record, as a radio and television news executive and fighter for a free and independent press, is unsurpassed. As a local station news director in Louisville, Kentucky, he established a national reputation for excellence and ethics. And then he came to Washington as chief of the Washington Bureau of CBS News in the 1960s and 70s. He was the best, the most effective, most courageous television Washington Bureau chief for electronic news ever. This is not just a consensus opinion. It is unanimous, and not just at CBS News, but industry-wide. As Washington Bureau chief, Bill Small was a leader in opening opportunities for women and minorities as on-the-air correspondents and in other roles, at a time when it was not an easy thing to do. It took guts. And he became a hero of journalism for his leadership in covering the widespread criminal conspiracy known for short as Watergate. Alone among Washington Network Bureau chiefs, Bill Small recognized early the story's potential importance. He had his reporters, including this one, pursue it relentlessly. The Washington Post, its editor, the great Ben Bradley, and his superb reporters, Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward, broke the Watergate story. They deserve every iota of credit for leading coverage of it start to finish. In and on radio and television, however, Bill Small was alone in quickly swinging in behind their lead and following it up as no other network executive did. And when President Nixon and his White House staff put on the pressure to stop covering the story so aggressively, Bill Small was a rock, protecting and supporting his reporters, including this one. This was his defining moment. This was his finest hour. If the record ended there, Bill Small would deserve a Lifetime Achievement Award, but it doesn't, not nearly. He was later vice president for hard news coverage at CBS News headquarters in New York, president of NBC News, president of United Press International, a dean at Fordham University, and leader of the Emmy Awards Committee of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. He has been a leader in almost every professional journalism organization, including the Radio and Television News Directors Association and Sigma Delta Chi, the Society of Professional Journalists. He is an author, including his landmark first book, To Kill a Messenger, which was an early warning about political and government attacks on the press. If there was a Mount Rushmore for electronic news executives, Bill Small's visage would be carved into it. But more important, Bill Small is a decent, noble man and a patriot. He has a deep and abiding love of family. His two daughters and their families, Tammy and Willow, are here tonight and should be recognized. But And again, it's important. He has a deep, abiding love of his family, his own, and the families of others, most especially the families of those with whom he works. If every man or woman who ever worked with or for Bill Small, and for whom he has done some good deed, were to send an email to congratulate him tonight, it would take him at least a month just to read them all. We honor him tonight as William J. Small, and those of us privileged to be his friends know him as Bill. But to all of us who were part of the amazing team Bill assembled and backed in Washington in the 1960s and 70s, he was always Mr. Small.
There's no doubt in my mind, as long as there are political figures and bureaucrats are going to try to hide things from the press.
Martin Luther King, 20 minutes ago, died.
Bill Small presided over news coverage during one of the most turbulent decades, the 1960s, in American history.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
These were very, very difficult times, and there were great pressures brought on the Washington Bureau.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
There's no doubt in my mind that as long as we have a free press and a strong one and a gutsy press, that we'll try to find out what they're hiding.
He was the perfect bureau manager. He was cranky, generally unmovable, but was inordinately proud of his correspondence and the work we were doing.
About 10 minutes ago, the march began, broke out of the grounds around Washington Monument.
Dan Rather, CBS News, the White House.
From countries as rich as Sweden, as poor as Bangladesh,
he saw journalism as a pillar of democracy.
I was a competitor. I was on the other side, and it was like going to war against General Patton every day.
Connie Chung, CBS News, Washington.
Sticking with diplomacy isn't getting the hostages out either.
Bernard Shaw, CBS News, Washington.
When it came to integrity, skill, and journalistic commitment, there was no doubt about where we stood. It was because of Bill Small. He selected us.
Bill Small came from Louisville, where he had been a news director at the local CBS station. They brought him to Washington because they wanted to put new life into this bureau.
He immediately made an impact. He had the lowest tone of voice, and it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And people responded to that.
Have you met anybody anywhere who wasn't scared to death of Bill Small? You're simply not a breathing, working news person if your knees didn't knock a little when you met him.
We all did what Mr. Small told us to do.
What we say to Bob Schieffer is that was a pretty good story yesterday.
All of us called him Mr. Small, and there was a reason for that. He was the boss.
More often, hopefully, we say to him, "We like the way you did that. Keep it up."
One day, he came up behind me while I was typing a script, and he read over my shoulder, and he tore it out of the carriage, crumpled it up, did one of those basketball shots, and said, "If you want to make it, kid, you better write better than that," and stormed off.
If you came even remotely close to being incorrect, you were dead. You were absolutely dead.
Bill was a hugely competitive boss. He wanted you to be first, and he wanted the Bureau to be first.
I'm wondering what would happen if CBS slipped to a distant third in the ratings. Wouldn't there be some changes?
Yes, if we slipped to a distant third, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Some friends of mine on the Hill had arranged to rent a bus and fill it with beer for a night at the track. I got a call from the desk, and the desk said, "Mr. Small wants you to cover George Romney's speech over at the governor's conference." I said, "George Romney? What's that loser? Can't you get Schieffer to do it?" "No, they want you to do it." God bless you, Mr. Small.
He was on the elevator with a guy one time, one of our correspondents, who was complaining about he wasn't getting enough attention. And Small said, has anybody told you lately that you're doing a good job? And the guy said, well, no. He said, there probably is a reason for that, and got off the elevator.
All businesses were in search of minorities and women in the early 70s.
The public hearings won't begin until April or May. Leslie Stahl, CBS News, Chevy Chase, Maryland.
I was hired in a group that we called ourselves the Affirmative Action Babies, and it was Connie Chung, Bernie Shaw, and me.
Bill had a great wife. Her name was Gish. She was a strong woman, so I think he understood how strong women can be.
I'm sure he knew that I was with Richard Nixon in San Clemente. I'm sure he knew that. And it still, to me, is a great act of faith to come in with all of the attendant criticism, certain to surround me.
Some of the most talented women broadcasters in America, not only on air, but producers and executives, work for CBS News. And there will be more.
I first met Bill Small when I came to CBS for a job interview. He kept me waiting, I know not why, for 3 hours, so that by the time I actually was ushered in, my fear had turned to basically fury. I walk in, and there he sits with a newspaper in front of his face. And from behind the paper, he says, well, what do you want? Without even thinking, just because I was so mad, I blurt out, I want a job. What do you think I want? At which point, he dropped the paper, we had a lovely conversation, and he hired me. I think it was a test.
When anybody in the Bureau was under attack, he was fierce in defense, absolutely fierce in defense. He was hardcore about the integrity of news.
In 1973, I found that I had been on Richard Nixon's enemies list. Nixon had wiretapped my phone, had done all kinds of things with income tax returns, had broken into my office. I went to see Bill, and I asked him whether he knew anything about this, and he kind of responded in a way which left me with the impression that he knew something about it, but he wouldn't tell me about it because he was protecting me. And I regard that as a fantastic bit of integrity on his part.
Hello, I'm Bill Small.
When Bill Small went to NBC,
The first order of business, it seems to me, is to beef up the organization.
I went to NBC because I admired Bill and his leadership qualities.
Bill came in, and he was very hands-on with both the Nightly News and with the Today Show. But he did something really important. He brought Willard Scott to the Today Show.
What are you eating over there? That looks delicious.
Time to get to the weather. No breakfast.
All right, no breakfast. Oh, it looks good. Anyway,
of course, he became one of the biggest stars the Today Show ever had. And then when Roger Mudd and I began the Nightly News together, that was on Bill's watch.
This is NBC Nightly News. With Tom Brokaw in New York, Roger Mudd in Washington.
When Bill finished at NBC, he then went on to do a number of other things at the UPI and then at Fordham University as a professor and administrator. He always felt there were things to do, there were things to learn, and he was out there to do them.
Bill, a lot of your friends want to say something tonight. I want to be the first to say thank you, I love you, I wouldn't be here without you.
At lunch with you the other day, I asked you about your genius for selecting and hiring good people. And you said, Bernie, I just know.
Bill, when I learned that you have received this award, I was thrilled. I said to myself, it's about time.
Bill, this is the reward that you so richly deserve because you have spent your lifetime dedicated to serious journalism.
Congratulations. It is so nice that someone who actually deserves an award is getting an award. And you truly are the gold standard.
Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night, nor drunken party at the racetrack keeps the correspondent from his appointed rounds, Mr. Small.
Mr. Small, my good friend Bill, a tip of the Stetson to you. And if you need bail money, call me.
Bill, congratulations. I love you.
Thank you for all those decades ago, and thank you for everything since, and not just for me, but for all of us.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Small. You can hold this for the moment, I think. Bill, the inscription on the award around the base reads, "To William J. Small, for his many contributions to broadcast journalism and for his leadership of CBS News Washington Bureau in the 1960s and 70s, where he created one of the most distinguished teams in the history of television news and inspired them to exemplary coverage of some of the most historic events of the 20th century, presented on September 30th, 2014 by the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences," end quotation. The microphone is yours, my friend.
My God, they said it all. There's nothing left for me. But I'd like to congratulate all of you who have been nominated, not just the winners, all the nominees tonight. You know, there are a lot of old codgers my age who approach me, some young ones too, and they say television isn't what it used to be. Television news is dying. What a way to go. When you watch what we watched tonight, you know that the quality is still very high, and I'm proud of every one of you. I want to thank Dan for all those lovely words. As the old saying goes, if my father were here tonight, he'd be pleased. And if my mother were here, she'd believe him. But it was a marvelous run, I must say. And my prepared remarks are now out the window. But I was particularly glad to see the women that you saw in that film. I've always taken special pride in the fact that I introduced so many women to network television, many of whom you've just seen, and it's at a time when we were an all-male enclave, and it just was a delight to see them tonight, to hear from them. Now, my first important job, I was graduating from the University of Chicago, and I was already married to a wonderful woman who you saw, Gish. And I got a job offer from WLS in Chicago. That was big-time radio, clear channel, 50,000 watts. Had only one flaw: their opinion of what a news director ought to be paid. My salary offer was $50 a week. Gish sat down with a sharp pencil, did the math, and said, "We can live on that, but barely." Our vacations for a number of years, we would go to the radio, television, news directors' conventions, because the boss paid most of our expenses. And bless RTNDA, we always met in interesting cities, and we got to see a lot of the USA as a result. I want to thank all the people who were on that little film you saw, but especially the producer, Susan Zarinsky. "40 years ago, this little waif was graduating college doing some part-time work for us, and she said, "I want a job at CBS News in Washington." I, of course, said, "This is a network, kid. We don't hire people who have no experience." Well, as you learned, she talked me out of that. And today, in addition to 48 Hours, produces many other programs. She's the most prolific and one of the best producers in all of television. And I'm proud of her as I am of every woman you saw there. Later, if we have a drink, I'll tell you a few stories that I can't say here, but I'll tell you one. I hired Diane Sawyer and got a lot of flack from the staff because she had worked for Nixon. And the only one who later came to me, Dan Rather, and said, "I was wrong, she's terrific." But when she was working for Nixon, she went with Nixon, as I did and many of my colleagues, to China. The Chinese at that time were unbelievably honest. If you left a pencil in your room, they came looking for you. Well, we were all gathered in the lobby of the hotel ready to move on to Hangzhou when a guy came in, a Chinese. She had thrown away a pair of underpants. And he held it up and said, "Miss Sawyer, Miss Sawyer." You never saw anyone snatch it away quicker, shove it in her purse. But there are stories about all of them. And when you get them alone, they will confess to you, "I wasn't really that tough." One of my favorite things is if a correspondent brought his wife and children in to see the Bureau, I would take the kids around, and the climax was at the end. I'd put their hand on the Xerox machine so they'd have a souvenir of a visit to CBS. Anyway, I moved on, and I must confess to you, I never had a job in news that I did not love. There were hard times, there always were, but it's a great profession. When I was a boy growing up in Chicago, the Daily News had a wonderful writer named Robert Casey. And Casey had a dream assignment. He was to travel all over this country and Europe and just interview famous people. He did kings and queens and presidents and great artists and writers. And a collection of his was printed as a book entitled Interesting People I Have Known. But in his preface, he wrote, "The really interesting people I have known have all been in the news business." And that's you, all of you. And, well, you could applaud yourself if you wish. But I have been blessed to spend most of my adult life in your presence. And here you all are today pretending that you want me to hurry up so you can get off with the rest of the program, and so I will do that. I just want to say that the lovely Gish passed away a few years ago. We had a marvelous marriage, 58 years of married life. She was my best friend, my confidant, my consolant, but most of all, the mother of two wonderful daughters, Tamar and Willa, who are here today with their families, and I won't embarrass them. They warned me not to introduce them, but they are here, and I am proud of every one of them. And so I now leave the stage. I'll give you a 10-second history of this thing here. It was designed by a West Coast technician in television in 1948. His name was Louis McManus, and his wife Dorothy was his model. She had a nice ass, by the way. And so I leave you, I go off stage, returning to obscurity, and taking Miss Emmy with me to finish my study of her anatomy. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.